Hey everyone, my name is Ging, and I'm a freelance production designer and art director here in LA, and you're watching Lepas Sekolah.
Hi Ging, where are we today?
Today we're at History for Hire, a historical prop house located in Burbank, Hollywood. And this is one of the biggest prop houses, and I have been frequenting this place for like the last couple years to acquire props for my productions. And also, I'm currently sitting on Ryan Gosling's chair from La La Land. Isn't this amazing?
So what did you want to be when you were younger?
So when I was a kid, I used to be obsessed with Indiana Jones style stuff. So I was like, I want to be an archaeologist. But then I watched Transformers 2. Yes, Michael Bay's Transformer. And I was like, holy crap, I want to be a director. I want to make things go kaboom, make things go explode. And yeah, that's how it all started.
Which high school did you attend?
I went to Chiang High School in Penang, Malaysia.
I understand Chiang carries both IGCSE and UEC. Why did you choose IGCSE?
Well, the difference between IGCSE and UEC is that for IGCSEs, it is an English-based medium. It also follows the British syllabus versus UEC, which is a Chinese-based syllabus. And for me, I chose IGCSE because number one, it's an English-based course. And number two, since it is a course from the UK, it allows me more flexibility in terms of like career planning in the future or, educational planning in the future.
And were you in the science stream or art stream?
I was actually in the science stream because there was no art stream in Hanjiang. I sort of pigeonholed myself into science stream because my dad was like, hey, listen, you have more avenues when you graduate, which is really not true, as I've realized it later on. And I had like a miserable few years doing science stream.
Since you've always known that you wanted to dabble in the creative industry, why choose the science stream?
I sort of got fooled by my dad because he gave me the impression that doing science stream is the only way to go, as there is a very Asian way of thinking that, if you do things that are not STEM related, you're sort of a failure. And it is not true. Like, I regret taking science stream. It took a huge toll on me mentally.
And what was your favorite subject?
When I was back in school, I enjoyed history class. The IGCSE history syllabus allows you to think. It wants you to analyze sources and think critically. And it gives you the skill to think about certain events or certain things from both sides of the avenue. And I think that is such a useful skill set that I still use today.
So how did you end up doing for IGCSE?
Here's a very funny thing. I actually got a B for my history. I got 6 A's, 2 B's, and 1 C, I believe, which is really not good considering the fact that that isn't even like the top 50 percentile for my school. We had people who got like 12 A's in my cohort. And that to me is like insane because you're basically in a pressure cooker. And somehow I got through it, with like average results. And look at me now.
Did you receive a scholarship after IGCSE?
So after IGCSE, I received like a pretty small scholarship of like a few $1,000 to go to Sunway, which I took on because, free money, why not?
What pathway did you do for pre-university?
I went with Canadian International Matriculation program at Sunway. It is a pretty good system for me as I realized that I just needed year 12 to complete my 12 years of education.
Did you consider any pathways aside from CIMP?
I was actually seriously contending like the American Degree Transfer Program. However, when I looked into it, it only provides like enough to get you into average universities. Like, yes, you can get into like some nicer colleges like, UCLA and whatnot. But for me, with my specific major and my specific school requirements, it does not really get you there. So I decided against doing it.
Can you elaborate on the structure of CIMP?
So CIMP adopts a 70% coursework and 30% exam structure. And that is amazing for me because I do not perform well during exams. And that 70% coursework, it was such a lifesaver for me because it allowed me to explore other options. And all the assignments really built up my basis towards my education here in the States, as Canada does have a very similar education system to the American system. And that gave me a pretty good transitional period towards going to college here in America.
So why Sunway? Did you like the environment?
At that time, Sunway was the only college and currently still the only college to provide CIMP coursework. If you want to do CIMP, you sort of have only one option in the entire country, which is Sunway.
How did it feel moving from Penang to KL? Were there any stark observations you made?
It was a very exciting time period as, you know, it was my first time leaving my family for long periods of time. And living in like a bigger city, it definitely gave me a lot of freedom to explore. I brought my camera to different crooks and crannies, and I got to just, observe the city from like an outsider's perspective. So yeah, I do recommend it.
At this point, I suppose you already know that you were going to film school. Were there any preparations you made outside of academics to bolster this ambition?
This is a very long story because I knew where I wanted to be back in high school. Like when I was in Chiang, I was like, ooh, I want to get into USC, I want to go to USC Film School. So I've started building my portfolio ever since then. I joined the Mass Communications Club, and when I was in college in KL, I was also preparing for college apps. In addition to all the essays I have to write for the usual college app, USC's School of Cinematic Arts also require you to submit a 5-minute short film and a bunch of writing supplements and your entire portfolio basically. So I spent that year working on my portfolio, polishing my essays, and one great resource with CIMP is that we do have an advisor who is very helpful in the program. And I was also working very closely with my English and creative writing professor back then. She was such a gem and she gave me a lot of great pointers. So yeah, utilize all the assets you have because those resources, you've paid for it. Use it.
How did you do for CIMP?
I actually don't really remember it that much because by that point, I've already gotten into USC. I think you did pretty well. Yeah, I got distinction. Definitely much better than Hanxiang for sure. But it's also because I was more used to that system and I adapted much better because, no exams. Isn't that amazing? But at the same time, it was also kind of weird because it happened during COVID, so everything was just up in the air. I remember getting my diploma from the postman. So that was a fun experience.
Okay, Ging, you ended up at University of Southern California. Have you always known that you wanted to study in the United States?
Yes.
Why was this? What was the appeal?
Well, when I started looking at places that offer degrees in film, it was sort of like a no-brainer to start looking at schools in America because Hollywood is where the whole industry started anyways. And USC is one of the top schools in the world for film. We have alumni like Ryan Coogler, George Lucas. The connections you get from school is incredible. As a matter of fact, did you know that Ryan Coogler met Ludwig Göransson in USC? They went to school together. And to me, that's the biggest attraction to me. It's the people you meet and the network you can build. It's incredible. And the resources in LA, places like this, where you could get all your productions fulfilled in one place. Amazing.
So why did you take CIMP instead of other pathways, like the American Degree Transfer Program?
Well, here's how I would break it down. So for CIMP, it is a 1-year program, and it is 70% coursework, 30% exams. Versus the American Degree Transfer Program, ADTP, it can take a year or 2 years depending on how many credits you want to take in Malaysia. And that is the equivalent to a community college here in the States. But it is harder for you to transfer into USC through community college unless that community college has affiliations with the school. And there's also A-levels, which is a year and a half. However, that is 100% exam-based. You have 2 exams that basically decide your future. And to me, that is not it. I have seen so many of my peers go through A-levels, and they were all extremely depressed. And a lot of them had to drop out a year into the program because they just could not take it. And I wish that, someone could have told them that that is not what you have to do. Just take something else. There's even the Australian Matriculation program. Just take whatever works for you. Or foundation year too. That's everywhere. So yeah, that's why I chose CIMP instead, because it is accepted by USC and it's the fastest way and easiest way to get me into that school.
Did you have to take the SATs?
Yes, I had to take the SATs and also English proficiency exams. And I did terribly for my SATs. I got 1280 out of 1600. And most people that got into USC scored 14 or 1500. So I was definitely the outlier. And somehow I still got into USC.
How many US universities did you apply to?
I would say like a handful, probably 8 to 10 universities. I did like at least 3 film schools, including NYU, USC, and probably UCLA, I believe. But at the same time, I also applied to several other schools as backup for communications, because if I don't do film, I sort of still want to be in this world.
Could you walk us through the process of a typical application to an American university?
First of all, you need your Common App, your Common Application. And some universities would require their own dedicated application process too. For example, the UC system has its own system, and the University of Texas system also has its own system. And you would write a bunch of essays, submit your scores, submit your transcripts, yada, yada, yada. Like compared to other countries like the UK, Australia, whatnot, what American universities look for is not just your grade, but also you as a holistic person. And what is your story? What do you bring to the student body? How do you blend well with other people? How do you work well with other people? They want good students, but at the same time, they want students who are able to hold themselves up in society.
And how was the move? Did you struggle with homesickness at all? Were there any cultural shocks?
The move was really weird because it happened during COVID. So, everything was online for like the first year, which was not fun. But it also allowed me time to connect with my course mates. That transition of me flying into LA and, meeting people was not weird at all, because by that point I've already known quite a few of them, and I was able to, my good friend Aristotle picked me up from LAX. We were at that point of like friendships, and then, on the first day I was in LA, I got to meet all the other people, like Sebastian and David, all my friends. I wasn't alone. I had already established a group of like people who are on the same page as me and have like the same wavelength as me. But of course, I acknowledge that this is an issue for a lot of people. So you could join group chats or Discord channels with like your course mates and, get to know them before flying off to like a distant country.
To my understanding, California is one of the more diverse states in the U.S. in terms of demographic. Would you agree?
Yes, I do agree.
Did you ever find yourself being treated differently because of your nationality and or ethnicity?
My unique background's like, it can be complicated at times, but it does also allow me like a very unique insight into the world, and the way I see the world is so different. I've been working on European films, I've been working on Chinese films, and I've been working on Asian films around LA. And because of the place I grew up in, being exposed to all these different cultures, I am able to leverage that and use that in my designs and elevate what I have.
What was the full name of your course?
My course name is called Film and Television Production, and it gives you a bachelor's in fine arts or a bachelor's in art, depending on the amount of course load that you take.
What expectations did you have going into film school, and what was the reality?
I expected more directing, more, cinematography. When you think about a film set, who do you think of? The director of the megaphone yelling in the back, right? All right, rolling, action, let's go, let's go, let's go. That type of stuff. However, or like, the cinematographer, like the massive cameras running film and dollying in and be like, all right, that's the shot, that's the shot. However, coming here, I realized that, we have sound department that runs the sound stuff. And it's like, without them, there's no audio for your film. And there's like the G&E team, which lights everything. And of course, where I am right now, the art department that dresses up sets with like these cool phones, these like amazing props in the back. And of course, Ryan Gosling's chair. I get to see the industry from a very different perspective, from the insider's perspective. And the way the production program runs is that you are separated into 6 tracks: directing, producing, sound, editing, cinematography, and also art. But of course, there are multiple different tracks that you could go for. But that's how USC organizes it. And that's how, I got to know the industry.
Walk me through a day in the life of a film student.
There is no normal day in the life of a film student, because you're constantly working on so many different projects. Like one week, you would be working on a period piece set in 1970s Greece. And the next week, you would be working on a boxing film set in like 2010s LA. To me, there is no normal day. Like, of course, you go to class and I maybe spend a lot of time in the editing labs, editing your work, on the soundstage, building your sets. But there is no normal day in the life of a film student. And that is what attracts me the most, because I dislike falling into a routine. I dislike sitting in a cubicle from 9 to 5. As a matter of fact, when I was a kid, I know specifically that I will not do an office job. I cannot do an office job.
Was there a module you had to take that you didn't expect to have as a film student?
Oh, yes. I had to take writing classes, which I wasn't really thrilled about because I did not think I was a good writer. However, after taking several classes, I feel like I understand scripts from a different perspective. I'm able to tell stories that are compelling, they are gripping, and I know story structure. One of my professors, Irving Beltash, he was like, after taking this class, you will never watch a movie the same because we talk about the whole structure of a film, a TV show, and we analyze the script, we analyze the story structure. That has been true ever since. Like every time I watch a film, I know what's going to happen next because I've been trained to anticipate, I've been trained to write from the perspective of a writer, which is amazing and terrible at the same time because the stakes are sort of no longer there as I can guess what's happening. But at the same time, it's sort of amazing because I can accurately predict what happens in a film. So it's a curse and a blessing at the same time.
Your capstone project, let's talk about that.
My capstone project is obligatory, and I was the production designer for it. As a matter of fact, that was my first time designing a film. Obligatory is a film set in 1970s Greece, and it's about a young conscript having to execute his college professor. What attracted me to that script was how real it felt, because back then, of all the scripts that were selected, I resonated the most with obligatory because my junior year capstone project is called What Were His Last Words, and it's about a dictator falling from grace. And, I've been really attracted to these type of themes and stories where we explore humanity under dictatorship or under severe political oppression. Being able to design the world of obligatory was so fun for me because I get to, decide how the offices look like, how the prisons look like, and bring in elements to elevate the story and elevate the actors' performances, which is what a production designer should do.
Aside from academics, what else did you get up to during your undergraduate degree?
During my undergrad years, I did a lot of photography too. I became the student assistant for Diane Farrington in the cinematography practicum, which is a class in which you learn how to shoot on film. That class was really eye-opening for me because I learned how beautiful film is and how that elevates your work as a medium. And even till this day, I shoot on film for my photography projects because there is something irreplaceable with film. And I am the biggest supporter of shooting on film now. Like Kodak, take my money. I just want to shoot on film every day.
What advice do you have for someone who might be looking to get into film school too?
My advice is that, start building your portfolio because that is what's going to get eyeballs onto you. Watch as many films as you can. Start thinking about why the films are made, how the films are made. And if you have a favorite filmmaker or whatever, study them. Study their style, study their history, and don't give up because doing film is not an easy halfway. Overall, just have faith in yourself. Don't stop filming things. Don't stop working.
Before we move on to the next segment, I have to ask, what are your top 3 films of all time?
My top films? There's an app called Letterboxd, and you get to choose top 4. I'm going to go with top 4. Number 1, Everything Everywhere All at Once. Michelle Yeoh, wow, you're so beautiful. Malaysian representation. Number 2, Your Name. I am a sucker for animation, and Makoto Shinkai sort of perfected the romance genre. And number 3 is Dragon Inn, the original version made in the 60s by King Hu. And that is one of the first films with an action choreographer, an action director. So that to me holds a very interesting place as I love action films. I want to make action films. And number 4, Conclave. I am Conclave pilled true and true. I love Ray Phineas. I love the performance that he puts up in it. And I just think that that is such a deep film. And it is so fitting for today's time and age.
Ging, you're now working as a freelance production designer and art director in LA. There's a lot to unpack here. Let's start with your job. What does a production designer and art director do on a film set?
So, a production designer is someone who designs the overall look of a film. You would go in and build up the world, color palettes, floor plans. If you're building a set, you would design the flats and whatnot. How do they go together and whatnot? And the art director, you execute it. You're like the producer of the art department. You go and you look at the plans and look at the budget. Be like, well, we can't afford building 4 flats, so let's cut it down to 3. stuff like that. You have someone who deals with the film in like the artistic sense, and you have someone else who deals with the film in a logistic sense. So, I can play both roles, and it's very common for people to do both, but usually in an exclusive fashion, because when you think about the art form, you can't really think about the logistics. And when you think about the logistics, it's really hard for you to think about the art. So there's a balance you have to strike between these two. And, that's why I separate myself into two entities.
There are a plethora of jobs within the film industry. What attracted you to production design and art direction specifically?
I love history. I'm a history buff in and out. I grew up in UNESCO Heritage City of Georgetown. And, growing up with all these amazing buildings, museums, whatnot, just in every corner, it's really hard not to observe how people live in such quarters. Coming here, I realized that skill set, that very random thing I picked up over my years, has allowed me to think about building sets and think about how people interact with their surroundings differently. And that's what you do as someone in the art department. You build the world, you create the world where the film lives in, and you give actors things to play with, things to bounce around.
I understand that while creatives tend to have more agency and control over their work and time in freelancing, the biggest downside is also that work might not be consistent, and hence your income might not be consistent. So why did you decide to go freelance?
The biggest reason why I want to do this is because it gives me the flexibility to pick and choose what stuff I get to do. Obviously, I've been picking a lot of stuff for the money over everything else because you sort of have to pay rent. But it also gives me time on the side to pick smaller projects that I think I really resonate well with, but they don't pay or don't pay well. So yeah, it does give me the flexibility.
And why have you decided to stay in LA? What about the city draws you?
LA. You love it, you hate it. It's so big and yet it's so small. Even though productions are, slowly moving out of LA, a bad day in LA is still leagues better than a good day in Malaysia. There's still a lot of productions happening compared to, back home. So that's one of the reasons why I'm staying here. And also my network. I've built my network in LA. I know so many amazing people. I have so many amazing resources, and I know prop makers around the city. Staying here helped me with my career, and it allows me to maximize my exposure. And at the end of the day, making a film is about resource allocation. And the reason why people want to film in LA is because, number one, it's always sunny. And number two, you have everything you need here in LA. So yeah, I like LA. It's fun. Great for my work.
In a city that can be so saturated with creatives like LA, how do you make sure you stand out in your craft?
I think it's about, the branding that you give yourself. Like, for example, for me, I am able to connect East and West because of my background. I speak multiple languages, which is helpful for co-productions, whatnot. And I have been slowly positioning myself to be the person people go to when they want to do projects that are international. I can bring a whole different country and a whole different world into the city itself.
To put it frankly, a career in film isn't typically what your Asian parents will expect of their child. Particularly in Malaysia, we are more often than not encouraged to be doctors, engineers, lawyers, and bankers. Talk to me about the mindset behind breaking tradition and going after what you truly love.
I'm gonna be honest, my family's kind of traditional. It's really hard, but I feel like after a certain point, it's kind of easy to explain to them that listen guys, I literally am not good at anything else. If I be a doctor, someone's gonna die. If I be a banker, I'm probably gonna lose millions of dollars. Or if I become an engineer, that bridge is gonna fall. Me as a person, I'm here to tell stories. I'm here to build things, do things.
And have your parents always been supportive of this career direction?
No, back in high school, my dad was consistently pissed at me because I would, instead of focusing time on my exams and stuff, whatever, which I tried, but I just can't, My dad was pissed, but after a while, I was like, this kid knows how to run a camera. Let him do his thing. And when I got to CIMT, I did very well. By then, he was like, you know what, he can do this. He'll make it work. So yeah, that's how I convinced my parents to let me do this, because it's the only thing I'm good at.
What would you say to Malaysian students who might be afraid of stepping across that line of tradition to pursue their passions?
Have you guys seen how many CS majors are unemployed right now? It's not a bad idea to do something else. Don't follow the trend. Listen, the trend is not to be followed, because if CS is the thing right now, in 2 years, it's not. And by the time you finish school, graduate, it'll be all gone. So instead of following the trend, Why not be the trend yourself? Do whatever you want. There's obviously things you have to consider, like, are you able to do it? Are you able to balance what you want with your career? Blah, blah, blah. But generally speaking, just go towards where you kind of want to be, and eventually you'll figure it out, okay? In USC Film School, in SCA specifically, we have a motto where, we mess around and we find out. Sometimes you mess around, sometimes you find out. And when you find out, you just fix it. And whenever there's a problem, you fix it, because life keeps going. Life carries on. So whenever something happens, you just gotta go with it. Go with the flow.
What genre of film do you gravitate toward?
I honestly gravitate a lot toward period pieces and action films. I love researching about a certain period, like 1800s, Victorian era, or like Napoleonic era, whatnot. Like, I love building up my mood boards, storyboards, pouring in enough time into building up the world that I'm designing.
Can you recall a challenge that you might have encountered on set?
I just got off a bunch of verticals, which are like vertically shot soap dramas, and I had to conjure up props on the spot, which was very exciting. Last week, I had to conjure out a Bible in like 2 minutes. So I grabbed a notebook I had in my backpack, grabbed a paper bag from a fast food chain, and I turned it inside out, wrapped it around, and I drew designs on it, and boom, there's a Bible. Yeah, it's problem solving. A great art director once told me, you have to think very fluidly in order to survive in this world. And stuff like this is what keeps me on my toes and what keeps this job so exciting, because you will never know what the next challenge is, and each challenge is unique and different. That requires a different approach to go into.
What is your proudest work?
It's probably still obligatory. It's my very first time designing a film. I had no intentions of doing art department up till then, and that film made me fall in love with doing art in the film world.
The challenge with the creative industry is that once you've developed your own style, you might stick with it and stop experimenting.
Mm-hmm.
How do you keep yourself creatively fresh?
That's a tough question, because every film is different. Like, while, I do like the routine soap dramas, I still find that every time I do a proper short film or a proper commercial, whatnot, it's always something completely different from the last one. The way I organize things might be the same, but the challenges I have to solve, the sets I have to build, they're all vastly different. So there's still a lot of freshness to it.
What drives you career-wise? Like milestones you like to achieve?
I want to end up in the guild sometime in the future. But overall, I think my ultimate goal is to bring international productions back to Malaysia, because I feel like I am positioned in a very unique place in which I understand the way film industries work, both here in the States and in Asia. I want to leverage that and connect these industries together, because international co-productions, that is the future of the industry. Like, people are going to film everywhere, anywhere in the world, and therefore you need people who really understand how things work in various places in order for things to go on smoothly.
Do you have any advice for people who might be looking into breaking into the industry?
This is not an easy industry to survive. It is tough, it is brutal, but the people you meet along the way, they're amazing. Build connections, build meaningful connections with everyone you meet, because one day you won't know who's going to bring you your next big gig. And also, there's no shame in taking on a day job, because this industry is so hard.
How would you describe the difference between a film scene back home in Malaysia and here in the US?
The film scene back in Malaysia is really bland in terms of the numbers of productions that are happening. It's mostly commercials. That's what most people do, which does not really excite me, but I do understand, because, commercials pay well. You get to build your portfolio without paying money, and that's really important. I talked to a pretty big producer back home once, and he told me that on average, there's around 30 to 40 domestically made movies a year in the entire country, which is not a lot. Working conditions are so different. Like, here in the States, you work for 12 hours and you're off. You get paid for overtime. But back in Malaysia, it's like sometimes you work 14, 16, 18 hours a day, even 24 hours a day sometimes. And you don't get compensated for overtime, which is a huge issue. And crews are usually overworked. It's a very sad situation that I hope one day things will definitely improve for them. But for now, It's not an easy industry. We see all the glamour, the red carpets, the stars, but what we don't see is the people behind the cameras, how much work they have to do and how little they get paid.
How do you think Malaysia can better support its creatives and artists?
Well, tax incentives. Like FINAS has, some tax incentives for international productions to come in, but I don't think that's enough. If we look at the international production side of things, Malaysia is in direct competition with countries like Thailand, Indonesia, and Vietnam for post-production and physical production. And if you look at the wider industry itself, a lot of productions are moving overseas because they provide amazing incentives and they have a good pool of talent and they have great incentives and they have all the resources needed. Whereas in Malaysia, all the resources are centrally located in Kuala Lumpur. There is a huge soundstage system in Johor Bahru, but it is way too far from anything else. The government, they have to start bidding against other countries. The latest season for White Lotus was going to be shot in Japan until Thailand offered even better tax incentives for them to move the entire production to Thailand. If we are able to subsidize the film industry, bring in more international productions, it will not only help the film industry itself, but also help our tourism industry and put Malaysia's name on the world map.
Do you have any plans to work back home in Malaysia, perhaps in the future?
If the price is right, sure. I think in the future, my career is going to be all over the world because of how globalized things are. And you should not pigeonhole yourself into whatever you're doing and just think big. Think as big as you can, keep chasing after it, and something will happen.
And lastly, could you describe your journey Lepas Sekolah in 3 words?
Anxious, insane, connections. That's it. The highs are really highs and the lows are really low. So I want you to remember that. Going into this industry, things will go south. So you just gotta go with the flow and be water, my friend. My name is Ging, and this is my educational journey, Lepas Sekolah.